Well, it is obvious to me that the solution for getting this stuff into Spatial and Roblox is going as low poly as possible. And so modeling the trees is of interest to me. Maybe I can try my hand at making my own tree that's low poly. So what I'll do is I'll go to one of the scenes here that's empty, and I'll call this, what is in there anyway? Whatever's in there I can take out and delete it. All right, so I can go in here and I'll call this the modeling scene where I do my modeling. And I'm going to add a mesh cylinder, and I'm going to scale that cylinder up in Z, and then that'll be my primary tree, and then I'm going to go into edit and loop cut it with, there's loop cut, and that is Control R. So if I go Control R and I loop cut and then use G, I think, to bring it down in Z, I can bring that down to here and then go to my face and scale this out to kind of make a base, and then take my face here and scale it down a little bit. And well, let's see, if I scale it in Z, nothing happens. I can go GZ and make this taller, and then I can scale it down to make it more tapered. This is a little awkward down here, so maybe if I grab the cut and then go select similar direction. No, that didn't work. Oh, that's similar direction. I see. So if I grab that and then say to select similar crease, maybe? No, that didn't do it. This is all learning about how to get these selections. Select linked I could do, but that's the entire thing as well. I really want to select just that loop. So is there a way to do select loop? Yeah, select loop. So select edge loops. There it is. And then G and Z it up. I can get, yeah, a better sort of cone look in there. All right, so that's the base of my tree. And then I'm going to add in, once I deselect off of that, I'm going to add in another cylinder, and I'm going to scale it up, and then I'm going to pick the top surface, and I'm going to hit S and scale it in, and pick the bottom surface and scale it up, and then maybe select the select linked and take that whole thing and move it down. Maybe still scale it up a little bit more there and scale it inside there. And then to select the whole thing, I guess we just keep going, select linked, and then I can duplicate it with Shift D, hit Z and move it up and shrink it just a bit, and then do the same thing and move it up and shrink it down, and then duplicate it with Shift D again and move it up and shrink it down, and Shift D and move it, G, Z, move, oh no, not that part, move it up. There we go. Do it, constrain it to the Z and scale that down still further. And we're getting up toward the top, which is where I want to be. And finally, move this up and scale it down. The top here is a bit too heavy or tall, so we will GZ that down, bring it inside. And then what we can do is give it a little bit of tilt to it. So select linked and then kind of rotate it a little bit that way. select here. I wish I knew, like, what is the select linked is Control L. So that's a quick key we need to learn, Control L. Then I can rotate that a little bit and do the same thing, Control L, and rotate with R. And same thing here, Control L, very useful key. Control L. Alright, and actually I want to move that down a little bit more. Here, Control L, I think I want to duplicate this and bring it down and scale it like that. And then here, Control L and rotate. Now, that top is looking really bad, so let's move this over. And then let's bring this one. Let's go like that. And then that top that's sticking out, again, we're going to GZ it down inside. And having that as a basic tree, there's also grabbing this and extruding it in with E and then scaling it in that way. And then GZing it up. And doing that for each of those. So extrude in Z, but scale it, and then GZ, move it up. So we have a little bit of look of as if there was bushes there. Extrude is not G, it's not R, it's E. And then scale it in and move it, GZ up. All right. So little things like that we can do. Now, when we go to the model, to the materials, this does not have a material. We have to go into object mode and look at this. And so we want to add to it. And here's where it can get interesting. So I will go to images and I'll say pine fronds, something like that, and look at images. I suppose with pine fronds, maybe I should just do a whole pine tree. Pine tree. And maybe I can do pine tree close-up. So that's a bit close. But what if I were to even take this photograph? That would end up looking like, oh, they've got all these watermark stuff. And not that that's going to have a huge impact on us, these stock footages. Let me try this. This is licensable. This one here. This one here is a video. I kind of like this one for now. I'm just going to try it out. So I'm just going to grab this image like so and save as pine frond texture. And having this, I can go back to here and I can add it. So it is base color is an image, and the image is going to be the pine frond, which is right here, and it is way big. So repeat, extend, single image, alpha straight, flat projection, to a spherical projection. Yeah, not so good. Box projection, a little better maybe. Or tube. No, not tube. No, flat still looks the best. if I want to make this smaller, these pine fronds, let me just add one more thing. I need bark. So I'll go fix things later after I get pine tree. Oh, there's bark right there. Pine tree bark. So that one's good. Like that. And grab it. Grab it, the grab it, rabbit. And let's say save as pine bark. And let's go back to doing that and add a material. So we add a new one and we will call it, open it, find pine bark. Okay. And having these two materials in here, you go into edit mode and we select that Control L, the tree. And we tell it that we want that to be assigned, and we'll actually name it pine bark and pine leaves. I'm going to assign the pine bark to that part. So I hit assign for that. And then here we already have the those leaves. So the problem is that they're way too big. None of it looks quite right. Now this one down here might be better off if it was projected in a tube, maybe, because it kind of is a tube, but it's still not looking right to me. So I'll just keep flat projection on there. And then what you do is you select all of this and you go to UV editing. And the first part is to just get our linked parts here. So, oops, I lost them. So do Control L there, Shift, and do Control L, Shift click, Control L. Notice I'm just using the faces to do my selections, and then Control L, Shift click and Control L, Shift click and Control L, and Shift click and Control L. Those are the faces that I have, including the underside. And now you go to UV, Smart UV project, and we're going to set an island margin of about 0.2, and then scale it to the bounds and unwrap it. So now everything's in there, but we want to have those fronds be really, really tiny. So I need to select all those and make them huge relative to that. But then the problem is, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. Let's see if we make it even bigger. So let's go like way like that, and then let's try and see. That's too repeated. That doesn't look realistic at all. Not that it looks realistic, but that's awful. So just keep experimenting and do some rotation too. So if we rotate this, what effect will that have? And then go and see the layout. Not too bad, really. I mean, for something extraordinarily low poly. And then this one here, if we go to Object Edit Mode and we say, well, what about that? Control L, and then go to UV Editing, and you'd see the bark is again way too big relative to the tree. So we can select all that and scale it way up. And then let's go look at what that looks like. You know, it's probably facing the wrong way. So what if we rotate this and try that? It's a little bit better. The blur factor could be because we're doing it linear. I don't know if we do it closest or we do it smart. Doesn't change anything. Do it cubic. Doesn't do anything. So that all isn't the interpolation, but flat or box, no, box is, oh, repeat's terrible for box. Sphere, new, tube, new. So once again, it seems like the flat projection is the best. Repeat, excuse me, repeat it, extend it, new, not good. Clip it, not good at all. Mirror it, kinda. But I think repeat is the best thing for it. And yeah, we'll see if we were to go back to UV editing and bring this down. We'll see if that makes a difference. A little better. It's got the right color anyway, so I'm not going to mess around with it too much more. I'm going to save this for one thing. But I'm going to take this selected thing, the selected object, and go Control C to copy it and bring it into, is that the right one, or is it the model export? Yeah, it's this one here for Roblox export. It's not modeling scene, that's the modeling scene. It's not scene. That one's not the right one, it is this one here. And if I come in here and I paste it, there's my tree. It's a bit big, so I can scale it down and start putting my own vegetation in the landscape. Now, like I say, it's not a perfect tree by any stretch of the imagination, but I just built it, which is kind of fun. And I can scale it, make it fatter or flatter, and do all that great stuff to mess around with it. And that can be kind of fun. So in the past, I've been doing things like if I search here in Blender Kit, I can get a tree. But look, this tree here, oops, I know I said it too quickly. This tree here is 1,372 triangles. I can go and decimate this tree by adding the decimate modifier, bring it down to 0.02 and see what, oh, that's not looking good at all. Let's say 0.05, no. Let's say 0.07, better. Let's say 0.1, decent. Let's say 0.5, better still, only 686 triangles. So that's worth it to decimate that and add this, apply this modifier. And then I can, I can Shift D and duplicate these around the property in various places if I like. After all, they are mine. Maybe make this one, scale it smaller. But if I choose Blender kits, then if I put for my filter, this is a plugin, by the way, called Blender Kit, you have to be able to get. And if I say that I want to do a file size that is a maximum of 300 and something, 350 maybe, and I do free first because I only want free, and then I put in tree, still got a lot of results. So there's one here that could be good. There's a pine tree, a real pine tree. There's a nice tree. There's a broadleaf, dense adult tree. We don't really know, though, how big these things are. I'm going to bring the maximum down now to 100 megabytes, and let's see what comes up. Okay, thanks. So let's try this with a 100 megabyte limit. We still get some of the same trees, and this guy has some great trees, this guy Toby Newby. So I can drop that in, and it downloads. It's 37 megabytes. But all that counts, so I'm only going to take lots of memory. And there it is, lying on its side, and then rotate it and stand it up. And then move this tree where we want it. I mean, somebody spent a lot of time modeling this very beautiful tree. And compare that with mine, and it's very, very, very different. But it's bigger. And we can scale it. We can scale it along certain axes. So we have all those capabilities. But when we actually look at it, it's got 1,240,000 triangles, whereas ours is 686, and we cannot have that number of triangles. By the way, if you were wondering where this statistics comes from, it comes from here under statistics. So there's just no way that we're going to be able to use this. It's great for if we're making movies in here, but not when we export to Roblox or to Blender. Can we effectively decimate it? I don't know. We can find out. We can go here and do our 0.02 starter that we do and wait for it to calculate and calculate and calculate, because there's a lot to calculate and it's not responding and Blender's freezing up, and oh my god. And it did do its thing. It got down to 69,000, but that's way too big still. And it's taking so long for the textures to come in. There it is. If we did 0.01 to make it half that number, so it'd be only 30,000 triangles, you know, it would be marvelous. Now it's at 69,000. So what was that? So 0.005 was that too. And it just, you know, for what you're going to get, it's kind of ridiculous. So now we're down to, we're still at 69,000. Like, it doesn't look like it's going to let us get any smaller than that. And while it's pretty, I can't afford that kind of real estate. I can't do it. So I take it out. And I'm going to have to model my own trees and bushes. But then when we get into Roblox, we can always add back in Roblox optimized trees. And so we have that option. Anyway, it's good to know now that we can take this, and if we wanted to export it to Unity, where we have this without trees, I'm doing this wholesale thing in here of just dropping the new blend and replacing that one. So I just go out here and I go, okay, goodbye, and then that's gone. And then I save my Blender file with everything in it, except for the camera and the light, which I've turned off anyway. So I go to select all with A, and I say file, and I say export. Oh no, here I don't have to export at all. That's for Roblox. Here I just save the new iteration of it, and then go back into Unity and import a new asset. And that new asset is in in here. There's the one that I was just saving, and I'm going to import it. And when it comes in, which takes a second, Wait for it to import. So when it comes in now, I can bring it in that way, but then I don't have the center properly adjusted. So instead I bring it up to the hierarchy, drop it in. I got my center. I've got to put the SRTM map back on there. And I have to make sure that I select this and I add that component, that critical component, which is the mesh collider. I need to select also this room here and put in a mesh collider. In fact, I need all my buildings. Every time I do this, I break that, and I need to put in mesh colliders if I want to be able to climb on them. So that is a bit of a hassle, but I think you can also select, like shift select things that you want to, whoops, I have a mesh collider on it. I think I can take these and add a component. Components that are only on some of the select types cannot be multi-edited. We'll have to see if this ends up being on this one. Yes, there is a mesh collider. On this one, yes, there is a mesh collider. So it did work for putting a mesh collider on each of these things. And now that I've recreated that, I should be able to go right into test scene. And the only thing is that you can see that my, oops, I don't want to go into test scene yet. Still, oh, it's doing test scene. Okay, it's going to be without the maps in there, and that's because I've got to bring in and keep them into my folder. I have to bring in the texture maps that we had. So I want to import new asset and go to my what I had here. I had pine bark and pine frond texture, and I need to bring those in so that it has the textures, so it can make materials. Otherwise they end up white. So it's loading now into Spatial, but probably without the textures, which now show up there because I dragged them in and they're tied. So let's see, maybe we caught it in time, but I doubt it. So we're loading the sandbox, so yeah. So, you know, it's always time. You always have to hang tight when you're doing this kind of stuff. But we can certainly begin to do other models that are really low poly. Or if we bring this in, if we want something poly count, and we say that we want to make sure that that tree is, you know, poly count of, let's look at what our tree was first. Before we bring anything in, our poly count was, got to get rid of that. Our poly count was, it's in faces and triangles, but 686 triangles and 2,511 faces. Oops, I messed that up. 686 triangles. I don't know what poly count means in terms of that, but let's say that we move let's do 700. Let's see if there's even anything. Yeah, there is. Look at that. So those are really low poly. Those are worse than mine. But that's not bad. Those fake trees, if they're within that poly, it's Christmas tree. These are like the really low hanging fruit, you know. But it's really about the textures. And, you know, wild grass. So if we were to do a different kind of low poly tree, like let's say we did this kind of low poly tree. It says error downloading. Well, there it comes. Okay. Did it come down? It says append failed. All right, so it doesn't even want to bring those low poly trees in. All right, well, I don't know why. Sometimes that happens. If we bring in these fake trees, they come in. Yay, they're good. So some things download and some things don't. And I think what they mean by fake trees is they're just basically planes with images on them. And we'll find out in a second. We'll come back to that. We're going to go look at our spatial. There we are. We're on the ground, and our guy collisions are there, so you climb on things, and there's our trees. But as you can see, our trees don't have any textures on them. So this is where we would have to come back in here and retest. And it shouldn't take long because the only thing that's changing now is the texture. So that should go fairly quickly. Meanwhile, let's get back to Blender and see. Yes, see when I say it did low poly, these are just images. Oh, here we go. It's about to load up. And for foreground or background images, if you're not going to see these things, then why not just have them out there, in the background? Because they're just planes. And you can put them in places where nobody's going to walk around them. That is certainly legit. And I think they show up, yeah, from two sides. So depending on, like if we're going to go inside this place, we could put these trees inside the greenhouse. Oh, we didn't mean to do that. I should lock things. You lock. Oh, let me lock. Too bad. There we go. Scale. So I should lock things. Anyway, this tree could be moved over into the greenhouse, scaled down, and then brought down in here so that when you go into the greenhouse where there's a back wall, and let me do Shift tilde and then W and I can walk in. So if I'm going into here I don't need to have a actual tree. Here I can much better off having an image that is seen, right? Because again, nobody's going to go up and inspect it. They're just going to come in and say, oh, there's a tree back there. Sort of the back of the greenhouse, if that was the case. So that's what you would do for that. You'd have these low poly things maybe up against a wall that nobody's ever going to walk and look at, or something along that line. Meanwhile, back in Spatial, our trees should have a, yeah, now they have the texture. Get my character up there. So for some gaming, I mean, that's okay. So that's what I wanted to look at today. And we'll continue learning Blender for Spatial and Roblox bit by bit till we're ready to do our presentation in Morocco about the real place of the Akrich Cemetery. Thanks for watching.